All right, well, we finally get to the part of the war where the United States is going to enter. Now, keep in mind, this war began in 1914. Remember the Archduke Ferdinand, and we see the Austro-Hungarian Empire invade Serbia. And so that's, 1914. I think June 24th, 28th, I can't remember. But the United States will get in really not until 1918, the same year the war ends. So the United States playing a very small role in this conflict, but yet a very pivotal role. Now we have a president, Woodrow Wilson, who was elected in 1912. So he is the president when the war starts. He is reelected under a campaign that promoted peace. You know, he has kept us out of war. So Wilson is reelected and then promptly gets us into war. Somewhat controversial. We can talk about that in class. But, events change. Things do change. So I don't want to say that he was lying or anything like that. But we'll see. Let's take a look. Now, why did the United States get involved in this war? This is a test question. And we'll go over this very carefully here. Right? We had the unrestricted submarine warfare going on. Remember, Germany is saying any ship that is arming Great Britain is subject to be attacked, whether that ship has guns on it or not, meaning whether the ship can defend itself. So long as it's like a cargo ship arming Great Britain, it is open to attack. Of course, the United States... Well, let's go back to that for a second. So this is going to outrage the American public, specifically with the Lusitania. We see civilians being killed, and but let's move on here. The United States has historically had pretty close ties to both countries. We did fight 2 wars against Britain, but most of the people in the United States at the time, are English speakers. So we're very closely tied to Britain culturally, and of course France did assist during the American Revolution, and so we have this, we have these ties to these European countries. Not quite as much with Germany, although this is kind of played down somewhat. There are there's a lot of Americans in America from Germany at this time. A very large German population, but not quite to the extent as with Britain. And of course, France, Americans remember them as getting involved in the American Revolution. Now, during the war, World War I, we'll see Germany attempt to create like an alliance with Mexico, basically saying if the United States gets into the war, if Mexico will help us, that is Germany, if Mexico will help Germany, Germany will give Mexico back the Southwest, the Mexican cession, as we call it. California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and that sort of thing. And of course, this note is apparently intercepted by the British, and it's revealed to the Americans, and of course the public is outraged by this. A lot of American propaganda, the newspapers. We'll look at some of the posters and things of that sort in class. We have close monetary ties with Britain. A lot of financial endeavors going on between these two countries, and of course the United States wants to maintain the balance of power, try to keep everything the way it was before the war began. Now, on the test, it'll be a multiple choice. Why? There'll be 4 choices. Why did the U.S. enter the war? And this is the incorrect answer. Entering the war would help the U.S. economically. But that is not what we learned in the textbook, because we see that there are close monetary ties with Britain. We see that the United States, specifically the farming industry, is providing all the grain and food in Europe, or a lot of it. So people in the United States are making a lot of money as this war goes on. And to suggest that the war did not help the U.S. economically is absurd, because it greatly helped the U.S. economically. And in fact, when the war ends, we'll see a big a recession in the United States. So here's some information. World War II was important in relation to farming because it expanded the U.S.'s role in agriculture. We fed almost the entire Triple Entente showing the importance of a strong agricultural economy. And of course, they have to pay for this food, to the American farmers. And so it's kind of a silly question. I don't know why Bob Jones does that. But anyway, let's move on. General Blackjack Pershing is going to lead the American Expeditionary Force, going over to France and fighting the Germans. There's going to be some tension between Pershing. Hold on. What do we have here? All right. So we had June 28th, 1914, the Archduke is assassinated. June 28th. Just keep that in mind. The United States declares war on April 6th, but doesn't really fight until May 28th of 1918. So this is what I was talking about as this presentation began. This war has been going on for over 4 years, and finally the Americans show up. Now back to General Pershing here. Ferdinand Foch is the supreme commander of all Allied forces, commanding British and French. This is a French general, but he's sort of commanding everything, and he really wants Pershing to get the Americans in the war. In fact, he wants the Americans to basically join up and fill the French ranks because they have been decimated. Pershing is like, no, I will not do that. The American units will only fight as an American unit, and they'll fight when they're ready. They get over to France and they have to train and prepare for all this. And so there's a lot of tension going on between these two commanders, an interesting situation. And as the war ends, right, Germany, now realizing it cannot win after the United States gets involved, is seeking a way to sort of end it, looking for terms that are acceptable. And President Wilson comes up with the 14 points. And they're pretty obvious. Nothing's severe here. We want open diplomacy between all the nations. Free trade. We should all be able to trade. Basically give territory back here. The colonies. The restoration of the French territory that had been lost to Germany. Let's create an independent Poland. Not really sure what that even means at the time. How much land Germany's going to have to give up. Create a League of Nations. And so Germany finds these 14 points acceptable, and they'll go ahead and sign the ceasefire, the armistice. Okay, there's a test question. What is an armistice? It's a ceasefire based on these 14 points, and this armistice is signed on November 11th of 1918. Now, this is the armistice. It's not the peace treaty, so the war is officially still going on, but no one's fighting anymore. So we'll see the peace treaty come along about 6 or 7 months later. So we had this on November 11th, which is 11/11, and it began at 11 o'clock. Strange numerology stuff going on. And again, this was the license plate, apparently, of the Archduke Ferdinand, A, for armistice, and then it was III 118. So the III, if those are Roman numerals, you can see it's the III or the 111, or actually it'd be 111118. Anyway, we talked about that in class, and so this is why Germany will sign the ceasefire. However, when the peace treaty comes along, the Treaty of Versailles, about 6 or 7 months later, it is a completely different situation. Total betrayal of what's going to happen to Germany. And of course, this will plant the seeds for the rise of the Führer. But we'll talk about that in another lecture. But as for the German leader, Wilhelm II, what happens to him? Well, he's going to flee to Holland. So we see him kind of run out of the country. Wilson is like, we're not going to make a deal until this guy is gone. And so Wilhelm II runs off to the Netherlands, where I'm sure he lived in a palace and lived lavishly, right? This is what these leaders do. And that'll pretty much conclude this section. So let's move on and finish out this chapter. The end.